Hey, did you know Long's Products is a family-owned janitorial supply with mops, brooms, trash bags, and they even have food service disposables, carry-out plates, and to-goes? Check us out.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jack, and with the Urban Cast, and we're watching the Let's Talk show this afternoon on an afternoon edition. Today, we're talking about something that affects every driver, every family, every neighborhood, and involves real government transportation dollars that can be invested right here in our communities. RAPC's Area Planning Commission has a public review and comment period right now for the 2023-2026 Transportation Improvement Program, Amendment 8, and the deadline to submit written comments is February the 19th. This helps us to break down this plan, and we're going to try to help break this plan down in plain language. We're joined today by Jonathan Bolen, Chief Transportation Officer for the RAPC Parish Area Planning Commission. Jonathan, thank you for being here with us.
Hey, Jack, thanks for having me.
Oh, no worries. Before we get into everything, can you introduce yourself to the Urban Cast audience and explain your role over at RAPC?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Jonathan Bolen here. I serve as the Chief Transportation Officer for the RAPC Area Planning Commission, which also houses the Alexandria Pineville Metropolitan Planning Organization. So my role here at the Planning Commission is to administer the operations, planning operations, both community planning and transportation operations that take place under the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And that area consists of what's called the Metropolitan Planning Area, which incorporates the towns of Ball, Pineville, Alexandria, and portions of unincorporated RAPC Parish. So in this process, we have several different programs that our MPO administers, and we're kind of the glue between the federal government, those federal funds that are apportioned to the states, how those funds from the states are apportioned to the metro areas based off of population. And then for us, we work with the public to get their input, stakeholders like local elected officials and other experts like engineers to program a series of projects that we implement using those federal funds inside that metro planning area.
Mm-hmm. And for people who have never heard of RAPC, what is the RAPC Area Planning Commission and what do you guys fundamentally do over there?
Well, we're a large organization, so we do floodplain management, we do GIS, we also do building code enforcement for several different parishes in the central Louisiana region. But I pretty much only can speak to the transportation division itself. So again, that transportation division, depending on the project, for our transportation improvement program, which you mentioned earlier, that focuses on that metro planning area. For the Highway Safety Coalition, we're one of multiple regions in Louisiana that are administered through our office. We serve the 10 parish Central Louisiana region. For Human Services Transportation Planning, which deals with rural and small, elderly or senior or disability transportation providers, human service agencies, we work with them and we cover an 8 parish Central Louisiana region as well. So depending on the project and the program, we tend to have a pretty broad brush. But for this particular instance today, we're really focusing on the Alexandria Pineville metro area.
Okay, all right. And RAPC PC is also the local metropolitan planning organization, and I think you kind of went over that. But
that's correct.
Again, I want you to break that down, Jonathan, so people can understand why does that matter to the regular residents. That's a big old long name. It seems like it ought to be something that government organizations are focused in. But why should this matter to just us everyday folk here in the community?
Here's the difference. We're one of 490 plus regions in the country that are identified as concentrations of population to have a metropolitan planning organization. And we've been in place since the 70s. We're technically a political subdivision of the state. And the reason that's important to the public is that we receive federal funds, a portion just for our metro area. It's not a lot of money. It's been the same amount of money for almost, I believe 20 something years. So we receive from the federal government right now roughly $2.8 million in federal transportation funds. Over a 4-year program, that's just over $11+ million of federal funds we have to spend. Our job is to find projects that are vetted through the approved federal transportation planning process, which includes public engagement, stakeholder input, technical expertise, et cetera, to then have those projects ready to go for that funding that could then be programmed and implemented over those 4-year TIP transportation improvement programs. For us, and part of, again, it's part of our job for the federal government and those federal funds is to administer and get public input into this process. So, our job is to try to make this as accessible as possible. So we present numerous opportunities, both in person, online, to obtain that public input that helps steer and drive the priorities for these funds. In a nutshell, it's this. There's lots of transportation need everywhere within our region. Transportation touches everything, but we only have limited amount of funds and they can only go so far every year.
Right.
Input from the public, stakeholders, and everyone else helps determine the prioritization of those projects. What's going to meet that threshold? What should bubble up to the top? Where is the need greatest? How are we going to maximize those federal dollars to where they're making the greatest impact on the region that those dollars serve? So they have to be regionally significant projects because they're regional transportation projects, and they have to have demonstrated impact depending on the focus area for those funds. So depending on the project and the program. So for example, FTA funds are only for transit-related programs. But even within FTA, you have different buckets of money, right? You have one just for urban fixed route systems like ATRANS. That's their own thing. You have elderly and senior transportation. That's a different bucket of money. You have transportation for individuals with disabilities. That's another bucket of money. Same thing for FHWA on the highway side. You have different programs that have different buckets of money. For us, we only have access to one bucket of money through our primary program, which is that transportation improvement program. That's that $2.8 million a year I mentioned. So for us, we have to find those projects that are vetted in our plans, and then we have to find the local sponsor for those projects. Up to 20% of the project cost has to be paid for by the locals. 80% can be paid for by the program that we operate through, which is a Surface Transportation Block Grant. But public input that folks can provide, whether in person at our meetings or at the convenience of their own home, on the computer, smart mobile device, that input is then directly taken to us. We take that and we build it into this selection criteria for these projects and help rank them. So that's why we're asking for input at all levels of our planning process.
Okay. All right. So when people hear transportation improvement, they assume it's just highways. What type of projects can be included in these plans?
Well, again, depending on the program. So for surface transportation improvement, it has to deal with transportation. So we're looking at roads, road overlays, whether that can be a complete reconstruction. Again, we can just talking about patching. We can talk about sidewalks. It's bike lanes. It's ADA improvements. It's improvements to transit stops, but not the transit shelters themselves. There's another program for that. But when we're talking about crosswalks, when we're talking about sidewalks, when we're talking about drainage that affects roadways or road flooding, all of that can be considered eligible through the program. And so that's typically what we focus on. We focus on all modes for the Transportation Improvement Program. Now, again, that's the general planning purview. We also have another program that I'd love to talk about too, which is our online public open house for our modern mobility study. That's a carbon reduction program funds. That was an exclusive bucket of money that was created under the current federal transportation bill, which is known as the IIJA, or the bill, the BIL. And that created that program that set aside portions for each state. And so for our state, we have an amount, but in order for our MPO to access those funds, we have to create an eligibility or scoring criteria to rank those projects that are submitted for this funding. And if they meet that scoring criteria, they're eligible for that funding. And so that's another bucket of money that we can complement with our urban systems funds to actually bring more projects to bear. And so that online open house can be accessed 24/7 through our website. There's a survey tool, there's a map it tool, and there's also online public comment form. If you wanted to just send us an email, send us a comment, or if you actually wanted to look at the plan, read the plan, provide the survey, all of that will be through that website. But that online public house is going on right now until February 6th. It started January 19th. And that's in addition to the 3 in-person opportunities we've already put out. One was at New Scott Alley, one was at CLTCC main campus downtown, and the other one was at Keys Park over in Pineville. And that's in addition to the online survey and mapping tool that we have right now. The Transportation Improvement Program, again, we're taking this long-range plan that we're just starting to update. We update it every 5 years. We plan projects out for 20 years. That's the big time. We really need people's input on that. So that's another public opportunity that'll be coming down the pipeline in the next couple of weeks that we'll need public input on. And that's the big one that deals with all modes of transportation. But for our improvement program, we're basically taking that big plan of 20-year projects, and we're breaking off pieces and trying to implement those every 4 years as best we can.
Well, Jonathan, I see a question that's sitting out here: how much money comes from that to poor communities? Or, a lot of times different communities say, "Hey, I don't see any of these resources," and basically now you're getting input, from a wide section of our community. How will these concerns go into what's already out there, where people will begin to see, that their input into this process will yield some type of result as well?
Well, there's several different ways. The first one will be when the plan is finished, they'll see the input in the actual equity and access ranking criteria. So that's something that projects that are going to be applied for the CRP funding, that's going to be it. So impact number 1, it's going to help shape the ranking criteria. Number 2, when you're looking at the type of roadway and those improvements, they're going to help go where the need is greatest. So for example, when you're looking at a roadway, or let's just say a portion of the metro area where you have a higher concentration of people who are walking, biking, or anything like that to try to, just for their daily commute activities, not just recreation, that's where you're going to see the greatest concentration of need and where we need to put those projects first. And then the other thing has to come down to who owns the roadway. So most people think that all roads are owned by, one entity, but in fact, the whole system within the metro area is comprised of a network of roads that are owned by the federal government, the state government, parish government, local government, and then private roads. And depending on who owns those roads, I can find 80% of funds in some cases for roadways that are eligible for our program, but the owner of the road has to come up with the 20% local match. And that's where you see a lot of the disconnect, I believe. And that's just my opinion. What you see is that some of the roads, especially in our rural areas, and especially areas that has historically belonged to part of the parish, or let's say we're just unincorporated and recently incorporated over the last couple of years, you're going to see that maybe some of those roads are still parish owned, or they may be private owned. And in that case, if you're a resident that lives on that road, you want to ask the first question, which is, who owns the road? Are we talking about a city road, a state road, or a federal road? Or is it a private road? Because whoever owns that road, whatever improvement is going to be needed, the local match has to be provided. And in some cases, if it's a private road, they're not going to be eligible for our federal funds to begin with because it's a private road and not a public road. So, and then if you're looking at our public roads, you have to look at the road as far as the classification of the road. So again, seeing that the program operates on regionally significant roadways, it has to be a road that is classified 2 different things. One, is it inside the U.S. Census defined urban area? And that's based off of the population. So 1. 2, if it is it classified as anything above a local road? In other words, is it a minor collector, a major collector, or arterial route, all the way up to interstate? There's 7 different classifications of roads. And then from there, if you look at that, you can say, okay, we run into cases where this road has need, our data identifies it, but it's a privately owned road. The owner does not have the local match, or in this case, it's not eligible for federal funding. Or you may go to a community where here's this road, it's a state route through a local community. The state doesn't necessarily have the funding to do the road. The community doesn't have the money to do the road for the local 20% match. And so you end up with this need that continues to compound. But it also, you got to ask that question, who owns that roadway? So again, for our area, one of 8 MPOs in the state of Louisiana, we have a decent system. And you're comparing the regionally significant system and bridges included in that. We know that there are projects that have been scheduled and on the books to occur in certain parts of the community, on the books now for several years. They are coming, but the thing that has happened the most since COVID is that the numbers continue to push up the cost. And if your project is already hemmed in at a certain cost, for example, we have a sidewalk project, or DOTD has a sidewalk project coming down Willow Glen. If you look in our transportation improvement program, if you go to our website and look under TIP, you'll see in the non-STP portion of that document, you'll see that project in there. It had just increased from 1.7 to $2.1 million for sidewalks. Think about that. If you set a budget 3 or 4 years ago for a project that was initially $900,000, then you got to find more money for 1.7. Okay, I got the 1.7. Now you're telling me it's $2.1 million. It takes time to find the money. It takes time to get the design to where we are. Projects are still going to happen.
Right.
The delay is coming down to the amount of funding and the cost of that it takes to do anything. We've got a project we're trying to put together right now through our TIP. That's not in this current program that this public comment is out on, but for the next 4-year program that involves just half of Jackson Street, already estimated at $3.4 million, which is more than what we get every year. So those are the kind of challenges that we're running into. So we have to go back and rescope that project to say, like, what can we get done for this amount of money that we have?
Right.
But for folks, again, it's for us to really, again, we put the vehicle out there. We want to get as much public input as possible. We want people to also know that their input is helping to shape this. And that's the other thing I was going to say is the product on the back end. You know, it's hard for us to say, hey, you got a project that's going to happen in a year, because between then and that year, the project could increase in cost. The project could change in scope. There could be an emergency or something like that, such as what happened with the Sugar House overpass, where some 18-wheeler hit that spar. That bridge had an emergency repair over $1 million. You know, so that's the kind of numbers that we're having to work with, all with that $2.8 million budget. So those are kind of the challenges. So we're just trying to help manage the expectations of the public and help them understand that, you know, for the amount of need that's out there, we have to start with, here's the money we have. Is the project vetted through the program? Who owns that road? And are they going to be able to find that local match to bring that improvement through?
I hear what you're saying. So I have a question I hear from one of the folk out, and they're talking about sidewalks along a particular roadway. One that I heard just a couple of days ago was sidewalks along another particular highway, and what I'm talking about is if you go from Broadway to MacArthur Drive, where Lee and what have you intersect, there's no sidewalks there. And there's been quite a few deaths along that roadway as well. And then here we have someone talking about Browns Bend Road, out just, I guess it would be off of MacArthur Drive in that area. So when at the end of the day, you know, how does the MPO work with perhaps the city, perhaps the parish? I think Lee Street itself is probably considered not only a city kind of roadway, but it's a state-owned roadway and all of that kind of good stuff. And then you have Browns Bend Road over here, and they saying, hey, we need sidewalks over here. And then yet walk happens, and the folk on Browns Bend and the folk on Lee Street still end up walking in the grass or having to walk into the roadway, and a car almost hit. how does that, how do y'all help navigate that process?
Well, for us, it kind of comes down to, again, we start with who owns the roadway. So we have our federal transportation plan, our transportation improvement plan, our metro plan, all those things identify needs in these corridors and things like that. So we don't own the roadway. We don't collect the funding. We don't select the engineers, and we don't identify the improvement. They're engineers that do that. What we do is administer the process. So, for example, through RAPC doing the building code enforcement in Rapides Parish, some of the development out there on Browns Bend Road would be going through that agency. The issue is, in that particular case, you had Browns Bend Road, which attaches to what we call the MacArthur Drive Service Road. And that used to just be a road that accessed a farm or farmland. And so there wasn't a lot of traffic on it. The problem is that all that farmland is being developed, and not one or two houses at a time, but 25, 50, 150 plus houses on a time. And what's happening is that traffic is being dumped on the MacArthur Drive right there at that intersection of Bayou Rapides, which is LA 496, Rapides Avenue, and MacArthur Drive, and it's slowly being congested. So part of what we do in our planning process, we do a model on it, and we run the simulation, and we identify what types of improvements can be done through that. Now, since it's affecting MacArthur Drive being a U.S. highway, there are resources at the state and federal level that we've partnered with DOTD and FHWA to access. So for that, they had selected basically a design group to go and simulate improvements for that section of MacArthur Drive to see if they're actually going to make a difference before we program any of those improvements. And so right now, what you're looking at with Browns Bend Road is the issue of, do we try to build our transportation system to be ready for new development and growth? Or are we always going to have to go back and retroactively fix infrastructure to accommodate new development that had just taken place? And so that's what you're kind of seeing over there. So it's not so much sidewalks, it's having to do with traffic congestion and an issue that was already congested with this new compound effort of having additional homes placed on it. There's a solution out there. It's going to require more money than we have as an area or a region. So that's why we have to work with our other partners. And that's what the MPO does. We're facilitating that partnership between the city, who is around the roadway, the state, who is administering this process using federal funds, and then the Fed, who owns the roadway and producing those assets. For Lee Street, you got to look at Lee Street, and you got to look at who owns what section of Lee Street. So again, another thing that I learned was that a road depends on the road section. So that portion of Lee Street that goes downtown all the way to Mason, Overton, right where the bike lanes stop, that's local. When you go from Mason, Overton down to MacArthur Drive, it is a state route. And that's what's interesting, because that was one of the first questions I had when I was looking at that corridor, which is like, why do the bike lanes stop here? Why do the sidewalks stop here? It went from a city street to a state route. In fact, it's US 167 business. So what we're looking at right now as part of our next long-range plan update, part of the next program, is to find, whether it's through our program or the state, funds to do two things on that corridor of US 167 business. One is to overlay it. It needs to be overlaid. And the other one is to add sidewalks and pedestrian safety improvements, especially around the Duhan Lane area. So for us, we're seeing the data, we analyze the data, we collect the data. It's public input, it's crash data, it's activity data, it's what we're doing in our own observations, it's other data set that we're collecting. So we see that. We're going out and meeting with the public. They're confirming that. The next step is to say, who owns the roadway? It's the state. Design and select the improvement. And then from there, we have two different options. One, we can try to do it as a request, one whole thing through the state, which we compete with everyone else in the state. And it's not a high success rate because we're going up against New Orleans and Baton Rouge and all the larger metropolitan regions that have a greater need just by sheer volume. Or we try to parcel it up and say these sidewalks are qualified for a highway safety improvement program, which can potentially pay for the whole thing, but it's also competitive. So those are things that we're trying to investigate right now and see what's the best way to expedite those improvements.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Oh, okay. So some people feel like right now, there are folk talking about Browns Bend, and really they were talking about that area back where it bends and go into that where the new development is, and people are having to walk on the streets. I guess they had completely bypassed that congestion right there at that intersection.
Right. They're coming in from the other side where the project.
Right. And then you have like Lee Street, Lower Third area where people are saying, hey, in order for people to safely, navigate, sometimes they have to walk into the middle of the street, and they're speaking up against it, and they feel like, no one ever answers them as it relate to, getting those particular problems resolved. And what do you say to someone who thinks decisions are already made, they're going to be left out? What do you say about that, man?
I say there's always going to have opportunities to come up for people to provide input. But if you're looking for a case by case as to I have an issue, or for example, as a constituent, I'm bringing an issue up because this is the street that affects me, or I have an elderly neighbor that's trying to access the bus stop across the street. If they're just saying it in passing or at a meeting, and it's not through a process where that data is actually being collected and captured and documented, that's where you want to get your input in. But the other thing is too, you got to look at the owner of the roadway. So for example, if it's a state route, that comment needs to be relayed, either through us as the MPO, as that vehicle, through the state. If it's a local road, then you need to relay that either through us or to the locals. So relaying it through us isn't necessarily just a one-off. You can email us. We do have an online public comment form on our website that anybody can email us any comment at any time. We have that mapping tool, which is precisely designed for that. So the caveat is you got to have internet connection or a smart mobile device, or you got to go to the library and hop on. But if you go to our website, you'll find this tool that allows you to pinpoint the area of concern. So whether you want to look it up by address or click and drag on a map and put that point, classify what type of concern is it. Is it a traffic concern, a safety concern, is it a pedestrian concern? You can add a description and even upload a photograph, and that comes to us. And so for each one of those responses we're getting, we are responding back, because that's the vehicle that, with all the other projects we have going on, that's the vehicle that we're using right now. In addition to the surveys and the other stuff we have going on, we always will have these ongoing public engagement cycles coming through. That's part of our process. It's coordinated, it's comprehensive, it's coordinated. So
the most important thing then is if residents, they've been saying it in passing and all of that kind of good stuff. The best thing, what you're trying to convince everybody to do, is to take it out of the pass by conversations and put it in these public comment forums. That way you guys have it completely documented. So if there's ever any question, and I would assume then the more people are saying something about X or Y or Z, the more attention it's going to get from y'all standpoint as well.
Absolutely. Let me run you through a scenario, right? One of the concerns that came out was the need for intersection improvements at Hudson and Main Street, LA1, where when we're down there at I still call it part of Third, but it's right when you get where Hudson intersects that highway. You look at that right there, lighting and crosswalks. So hey, that's on the map. Well, 3 more comments later said the same thing. Well, now I'm going to go in there and I'm going to look at that intersection. At all I got 360 miles of intersections and roads and bridges to look at, 244 bridge structures, thousands of center. Issue, put that down. My point is that project, I went in there, we looked at it, we saw the crash data, we saw there's need, we saw there's a need for improvement of lighting. Boom, that's a project. We've got a project. We put that in our long range plan. Now that project will be eligible for the federal roadway funds to implement those improvements, because, lighting on a roadway lighting at a crossing signals, smart traffic signals, signals that talk to each other so you're not hitting a red light every block. All that's eligible through our program. But that's how we're going to get it on a map. That's why we call the tool Map It. You got a concern, map it. You have a suggestion for an improvement, map it. Tell us about it. That gives us the data that we can stand on to move forward in the planning process to get those improvements implemented. Excuse me, it took me a minute.
No worry. If you had to say, what would be like, when people are making these comments, even back in the day when it was via paper, what would be a mistake, or is there anything such as a mistake that a person could make when they're trying to make a comment on something? If you had to look at it and say, okay, I'm just going to throw this out, because it just didn't.
Well, it's got to be relevant. So if we're asking for improvements on the transportation system and folks are talking about wastewater or water system or electricity or something like that, or utilities in general, that necessarily is not going to fit in our process because our project can only handle road funds, for example. Although we've also had comments where somebody's asked us questions in the comments, like there was an individual that lived on a road that wanted to know whether the road was parish or private. And we looked it up and we responded to him and said it's private, but for folks in general, it's keep it relevant, keep it constructive, as much detail as you can. Don't just say the street light's out on my road or my intersection's terrible. Like, what's the intersection? It doesn't have to be a detailed dissertation. And as always, it's keep it friendly. It's kind of the be nice or leave thing. But at the same time, we understand people have questions, but it's got to focus on transportation. The more information or constructive information you can give us, the better. And then, keep it friendly.
And another thing that I get a lot from folk is they feel that there are communities that have historically been overlooked, in transportation planning. If so, what can be done? And I'm pretty sure you're gonna probably drive right back down to make sure we get whatever your issues are documented. But there are tons of people in East Alexandria, Southeast Alexandria. They just 100% believe that projects get overlooked in their community, irregardless of, a safety factor, a need factor, or whatever. And so what do you say to those people when they feel that way? And what's RAPC's objective to try to meet their needs?
Well, for us, for the project selection, first of all, we have that in our criteria. So that's one of those things that helps us. So that input's not going to directly choose the project, but it's going to inform the criteria that help identify the project. So that's option one. The other thing for folks is that, they can always ask. So if there's a particular project, feel free to use the online public comment form they have and ask us. It may not be our project, but if it's a road project, we certainly could find out more about it. So some of these projects, again, you have to come and look at it. I guess to put it this way, you got to ask the right questions. And by right questions, just put it in a public comment form and send it to us, because each project is going to have its unique own set of circumstances, because every road's different. So for us, if you want to know about improvements in your neighborhood, your community, or your district, that's a good question for us. We can always look at that up and put that back. We may not be able to immediately respond, but we can look at projects that are coming through DOTD or our agency that are going to be occurring in that neighborhood. In fact, you can go on right now onto our website and look at the Transportation Improvement Program document. And in that schedule, you can see those projects and the federal year they're scheduled to be let for construction. So that's one way that folks can be informed on that. But if they see a project that's been out there for a while and they want to know what's the status, that's the vehicle. So online public comment form, online mapping tool, the surveys when they're out there. But you can always call us too. But the idea is to be able to ask those questions, put that vehicle out there to where we can give you an answer. So, again, it comes down to who owns the roadway. If it's a parish road, that there's another question on top of that, which is whose district is it in?
Right.
Because again, that comes down to individual millages for each of those districts. So each district has different buckets of money that they have available.
Hmm.
So depending on that road, the section of that road, whether it's a locally owned portion of Lee Street or a state-owned portion of Lee Street,
Right.
if you want to know more about that project, is it coming? When is it coming? Will it ever come?
Hmm.
Ask us and let us know. I can tell you through our agency and our current 4-year program that runs between federal year 2023 and 2026, we started the program off with 5 road projects.
Hmm.
We have only let 1 because of the changes in scope and cost increases for all these projects. So right now, we have 2 projects that we hope to have let by the end of 2026. And that's federal year 2026, which ends September 30th. One of those is the Masonic Drive improvements from Lee Street to Texas. And the other one is a portion of England Air Park that goes from England Drive to Vandenberg, because we have a lot of freight traffic that's connecting 49 to 28.
Hmm.
We had another program of projects in 26 that had originally 7 roadways in Alexandria, including portions in South Alexandria. However, that project had swelled to over $3 million, $3.3 million total. So 2 road segments have been pulled out. We're in the process of putting those back, but you're going to see improvements to Dallas. You're going to see improvements to all of Hudson along that. In addition to what the state's bringing in on Willow Glen River Road with the sidewalks and bridge replacement projects as well. But the thing that gets me, and this comes back to one of our original points in meeting, is that there's that communication crisis. And that's why I'm asking folks to ask those questions. Use
Right.
that form. Write a letter. Give us a phone call, but put it in writing in some ways always preferred so we can get back.
Hmm.
But the idea is to say, like, you do have projects coming. They may not come when they were supposed to for X, Y, and Z region. Hey, we found out that there's a utility line at where that project is. So we have to find more funding for that utility line. That's another $160,000 on top of that $2.1 million for those sidewalks. But in any event, that's those would be the vehicles that I would encourage folks to use.
Hmm. So give us a run. Where are we with the Sugar House Road extension project? Do you because I know that was probably part state funding, probably some local funding, and
That's
then
right.
and there's a straight route, and then there's a route that takes us back over to Hudson. Where are we right now on that?
That's a great question. So give you a little bit. Sugar House Road is an example of a partnership project. I like to call them partnership projects. So
Hmm.
the city's putting up, it's a total cost, as you know, phase 1 was the current Sugar House Road portion. That project had already finished. Phase 2 is the extension from where the road currently ends all the way to LA1. Project now is estimated at $17 million to complete.
Hmm.
The partnership effort would be the MPO is putting up over $2.5 million. The city's putting up $7.5 million, and the DOTD is putting up the rest of the funding through a combination of state and federal funds to do that. So we did have, now that project is being administered by the state. We are paying a portion of that through our program. You can see that in the TIP document. They did have a public outreach meeting to get input on 2 alternatives. So you had 2 route alternatives that the models, the engineers, and the environmental specialists came to the conclusion of these are the 2 feasible possible routes for this Sugar House Road extension. So one of those, so you always have to have 2 different options here for review. So the first option here in this case would be connecting the road to Hudson. And what that would do is, you would connect to Hudson. It would give Hudson a different way to get out to LA1. But for a lot of us, and I'll say for me personally, I feel that would not be the best, because every driveway on a highway is what's called a potential conflict point. That's a potential crash location. That's how I see it.
Right.
So anytime somebody's pulling out, somebody's backing out, somebody's going to run into that. The other model is just taking Sugar House Road and not making necessarily a straight line, but you're connecting it directly to LA1 without connecting into Hudson. Hudson can tie into it, but you're not routing traffic from LA1 down Hudson Boulevard to get to MacArthur Drive.
Right.
So that's the option that I would like to go for. The process is this right now. It is in the environmental phase. And so environmental review, once it completes that, they'll update what that true cost will be. $17 million, maybe $19 million, maybe $20 million. And then from there, it's programming and implementation. So I can tell you right now, for our next 4-year program, 2027 to 2030, we are trying to figure out where best to place that project. We're always going to commit to bringing that project through. We've got to put that money out there.
Right.
But it's always going to be determined by the level of project readiness. And so that's something the engineers have to do. And they tell us where they are with the project. And then from there, we determine where to program that. Which federal year are we going to realistically see that project led? So that project, that's where we are right now. So they did the public outreach side for the 2 alternatives to get their input on that. I have not seen the results yet between what the public feedback suggested, what's the preferred alternative, but I know right now it's stuck in environmental. So, well, I should say it's been undergoing environmental, this current round of environmental for a couple of months now. So it should be wrapping up soon, and then we'll move on to the next phase.
Oh, that sounds like a winner. Before we get ready to get out here, tell us exactly where we go to give you guys those public comments.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So
let's make sure we get them back, because I know you got
the primary vehicle is rapc.info, and you do /transportation. That takes you right to the MPO page. When you go to rapc.info /transportation, you scroll down and you'll see under news, you'll see all the news. We've got a public transportation policy committee coming up. That is that's the policy vehicle for the MPO. That's open to the public. We do have an online option as well. You can access that to the website. We have an online public review and comment stats right now for TIP Amendment 8, which you had mentioned earlier today. We've got our carbon reduction program known as the Modern Mobility Study. That's where we would love you to go right now. If you click on Modern Mobility Study, you can either use those direct links there or click on the link, say, online public open house. It'll take you right to it. And there you'll have all the tools. It gives you a rundown on the carbon reduction program for the state of Louisiana, how that ties into what we're trying to do for the MPO, what we're asking for your input. And then you have those options all the way down to online public comment form. And of course, something new, we actually have a Facebook page now. So that link is also on our website, rapc.info, transportation. But you can also see our other plans, our studies, and not just the Transportation Improvement Program, but you can also find what's called the Unified Planning Work Program. Jack, you mentioned it earlier. We got acronyms, it's government. But if you want to know what we're working on this whole state year, between July 1st, 2025 and June 30th, 2026, it's all in that document. So if you want to see every federal penny that has gone through the MPO area, it's at the very bottom of that page under ALOP, Annual Listing of Obligated Projects. So all of our information is online. You've got online public survey right now for the carbon reduction plan. You got the Map It tool, which is 24/7. It'll always be on our website. It's a vehicle, it's a tool for everyone to use when they see it. So maybe after you get home from work today, it may be tonight when it hits you, or it may be the next day when you're walking down the street. That's what that tool's for. And then, of course, that online public comment form. If you have a generic comment you just want to throw our way that deals with transportation, send it to us. If it pertains to what we're trying to do, we're definitely going to respond. So the Map It tool is a great vehicle, but all of that's on that website. So you can find out what we're doing, opportunities, projects, all there.
It's all there. And so for that person, and we cover, when we're out here covering the news, we try to capture, like when an accident happened, and what we see a lot of times, or what we read sometime in the comments, is that this intersection, someone really need to take a look at this intersection. And I'm pretty sure I can go to naming a few of them, Windermere and 28 West, MacArthur Drive and the exit going on to 28, and so on and so on and so on, and some over in Pineville and what have you. But if folk want to make you guys aware of that, they're going to go follow rapc.info/transportation, and they can start adding some comments. I think I'm gonna start putting that at the bottom of my my articles. If you want to make, if you got a comment, I see you putting the comment out here, but the real place that comment need to go is over there. Yeah. You guys.
That Map It tool is where we need it. And yeah, you nailed it right on the head. There is a lot of need out there. That's the challenge. So you've nailed a couple of hot spots, especially when it comes to vulnerable road users, folks who are walking and biking and things like that. Some of those, we've got applications in for other projects because we have the data. So it started with the public need. So we have documented public need. Step one, that's where the Map It tool comes into play. Step two, we have documented crashes on site. Now, for us, we have to operate off of data that is the prior year because the data that is collected has to be reviewed, quality controlled, make sure everything's in the right place. So, for example, I've just now received access to 2024 data. But my point is, you do that, the data lines up on that. Now it's eligible for Highway Safety Improvement Program funding. So we put an application in there, and that's where we're waiting. Same thing with LA 28 East in Pineville. We've got some crossings that are needed right there, some pedestrian improvements. The local's not going to have the money to do it. It's a state route, so it qualifies for those programs, and that's what we're going to do. We always try to find the funding that's available to us to fit that need. So, because we don't have all the resources to do it all at once locally.
Well, Jonathan, we hitting that time limit. I'll tell you what, you see how quick this time go, and it just seemed like it was just
yeah, it goes by fast.
It goes by fast, man. Listen, is it anything that you think that you need to let the public know that we didn't cover here? You got the mic, man.
I encourage every member of the public who is interested in improving the roads in their communities and their neighborhood to take a moment just to visit the website, provide your input. And there's several different ways to do it, but just how are we going to know if we don't know? That's the phrase I like to use, but sharing your input has a lot of power, and we put that vehicle in place to make sure that you have that opportunity. So take advantage of it. Ask us those questions. We're here for you.
All right. Well, Jonathan, thank you for joining us and breaking all of this stuff down in a way that the community can truly understand what's going on. To everyone watching, this is real government money that can be invested right here in our neighborhoods, but the public has to speak up. The comment period for this current project is open through February 19th, 2026, and you can review the documents and all of that kind of good stuff out there at rapc.info/transportation. As always, as always, we want to thank our followers for supporting independent local coverage. And all that kind of good stuff. And we also want to thank our supporters, Saddlers Towing, Lungs Products, Legendary Kung Fu and Tai Chi, United Wrestling Entertainment, Nader International Market, and the Threadhead Embroidery. This is Jack with Urbancast, and this has been the Let's Talk Show this afternoon. We'll see you the next time. Jonathan, again, thank you so much for taking the time to come over here and explain this stuff to us.
Thanks again, Jack. Anytime.
All right. I'm going to end.
Hey, did you know Long's Products is a family-owned janitorial supply with mops, brooms, trash bags, and they even have food service disposables, carry-out plates, and to-goes? Check us out.